Tom Selleck has been the calm, steady presence audiences admire. An actor who never relied on scandals, publicity games, or flashy headlines to stay relevant. But behind that trademark mustache and quiet confidence was a man who built something far greater than fame. And now, as the truth about what he left behind finally comes to light, even his closest family members are struggling to hold back their emotions. People always assumed Tom lived a modest, simple life on his California ranch, focused on family, hard work, and privacy. What few realized was just how much he sacrificed along the way, turning down multi-million-dollar roles, walking away from Hollywood at his peak, and choosing a life far from the spotlight. Those decisions, once questioned by the industry, have now revealed a surprising and deeply emotional outcome, because hidden behind that quiet life was a legacy built with remarkable planning, financial choices no one expected, private projects he never spoke about, promises he made decades ago, and one final act that completely changed how his family sees him. What he left behind isn't just a fortune in the traditional sense. It's something far more powerful, more meaningful, and more overwhelming than anyone imagined. As details finally emerge, those closest to him can barely talk about it without tears. This is the real story: how Tom Selleck, with almost no fanfare, built a legacy that left his entire family in shock and moved them to tears. Long before anyone understood the depth of Tom Selleck's legacy, he was simply known as the man who brought charm, humor, and quiet power to every role he touched. From his breakout moment in Magnum P.I. to his long-running success on Blue Bloods, fans saw him as a symbol of stability. But what most people never realized was how carefully he built his life behind the scenes, step by step, decision by decision. His journey wasn't driven by fame or greed. Instead, it was guided by a very different belief that true success is measured by what you leave behind, not by what you accumulate. Tom grew up in a hardworking family that didn't have much. His parents taught him that humility and integrity mattered more than money. Those values shaped every choice he made later in life, even as he found himself becoming one of the biggest names on television. He refused to chase the spotlight or fall into the traps of sudden fame. He lived modestly, often reminding people that attention fades but character doesn't. During the height of Magnum P.I., Tom faced endless pressure to expand his public image. Major studios offered him roles that came with massive paychecks, hoping to turn him into an action movie icon. But Tom rarely accepted them. He famously turned down roles that could have made him one of the richest stars of his time, not because he was uninterested in success, but because he refused to sacrifice his personal life for the sake of a bigger bank account. Instead, he bought a quiet ranch in California and worked tirelessly to build a meaningful life away from Hollywood noise. He planted trees, restored old barns, learned how to care for livestock, and spent time with family. To him, the ranch wasn't a luxury, it was a foundation. It was a promise to himself that he would never allow fame to control him. This mindset led him to manage his finances differently from most actors. While others invested in glamorous properties and expensive lifestyles, Tom looked for long-term security. He poured money into land, agricultural projects, educational funds for future generations, and private ventures that almost no one knew existed. His accountant once described him as a man who planned not for tomorrow, but for decades ahead. But even more surprising was the emotional foundation behind his decisions. Tom knew that one day, whether he was still in front of a camera or far from it, the people he cared about would need stability. He wanted his family to feel supported, safe, and grounded even when he was no longer around to guide them. He believed that protecting them financially was only part of the responsibility. The real gift was ensuring they understood the values that shaped his life. That is why he kept many of his choices private. He never bragged about his investments, never talked publicly about the charities he supported, never mentioned the personal promises he made. Instead, he worked quietly, trusting that the day would come when everything would reveal itself naturally. And now, as his family looks back at the life he built, they are overwhelmed not by the size of his fortune, but by the depth of his intentions. Every detail reflects how deeply he cared. Every decision reveals a man who thought far ahead. And every part of his legacy paints a picture of someone who lived not for fame, but for love, loyalty, and purpose. His journey is only beginning to unfold, and what comes next leaves his family even more emotional than they expected. As Tom's life moved forward, he continued shaping his legacy with the same steady discipline that guided him since childhood. While many actors drifted from one project to another, Tom was intentional with every role he accepted. He believed each project should serve a purpose not just for his career, but for the life he wanted to build. That philosophy became even clearer when he stepped into one of the most defining roles of his later years, the family patriarch on Blue Bloods. The character resonated with him on a deep level. The quiet authority, the moral compass, the devotion to family, these were not just fictional traits. They mirrored the real Tom Selleck, and as the show grew into a long-running success, he found himself with a steady income that allowed him to secure his family's future without sacrificing his personal life. But what few people know is that Tom was also navigating heavy personal responsibility behind the scenes. His ranch demanded constant attention, land that large needs maintenance, irrigation, conservation planning, and long-term investment. Tom spent hours learning about sustainable farming, water rights, and preservation laws. He wasn't just buying land, he was nurturing it. Over time, his ranch became one of his most valuable holdings. Tom also invested in smaller, more discreet properties, placing them in trusts rather than under his own name. He did this to protect his heirs from legal complications, financial strain, or public intrusion. He never wanted the people he loved to struggle through complicated paperwork or public pressure. After he was gone, he prepared every detail long before anyone knew they needed it. Another major part of his plan involved education. Tom believed that knowledge was the strongest form of inheritance. He quietly funded academic accounts for younger family members, ensuring that no one would ever face the burden of tuition fees. He wanted future generations to pursue their dreams without worrying about money holding them back. Tom's commitment to emotional stability was just as important as financial support. He knew fame could be unsettling for families, especially when one member lives under constant public scrutiny. So he created an environment that prioritized privacy, unity, and strong moral grounding. He kept his loved ones out of the spotlight, shielding them from the pressures he experienced early in his career. As the years passed, Tom continued refining his plans. Legal advisors helped him set up multiple safeguards, including trusts, property protections, and charitable provisions. But even these financial measures held emotional meaning. Tom didn't want his fortune to create tension or conflict after he was gone. He wanted every decision to reflect clarity, compassion, and fairness. His friends often said he carried himself like someone who understood the weight of responsibility. He rarely made impulsive choices. Everything he did connected to a bigger vision, a vision that stretched across decades and generations. That foresight is what his family now sees so clearly as they go through the arrangements he left behind. What stunned them most were the things he never talked about. There were hidden investments, fully paid properties, and carefully structured accounts designed to grow over time. None of it was meant to impress anyone. Tom simply believed that a quiet plan was better than a loud promise. For many in his family, reading through the documents he prepared became an emotional experience. They realized he had spent years thinking about their future long before they ever imagined needing guidance. Every detail revealed something personal, how deeply he loved them, and how determined he was to protect them. And in the middle of all this planning, Tom also left behind heartfelt notes, attached to certain decisions, messages that reflected gratitude, wisdom, and hope. These small, personal touches are what moved his family the most. But the most surprising discovery was still ahead. What they uncovered next changed everything they thought they knew about Tom's private journey. As Tom's family continued sorting through the carefully organized files, they came across something unexpected: documents that revealed an entirely different side of his life, a side he never talked about publicly. These papers outlined financial moves, long-term decisions, and deeply personal commitments that showed just how far he had gone to secure not only his family's future, but also the futures of people he quietly helped along the way. The first Surprise came in the form of several sealed letters, each one addressed to a specific person. They weren't dramatic or sentimental. Instead, they were thoughtful messages that explained why he made certain choices. One letter discussed a longtime friend who had faced financial hardship years. Earlier, Tom had arranged long-term support, without ever allowing that friend to feel indebted or embarrassed. Another letter revealed that he had donated land in secrecy to protect an endangered area near his ranch, something his family had never known about. But there was something even more emotional waiting inside a separate folder marked only with a date. Inside it was a detailed record of a personal promise Tom had made to himself decades earlier, long before Blue Bloods, long before his late career fame. It outlined a vow he wrote as a young actor just starting out, that if he ever became successful, he would use that success to lift others quietly, not publicly. He kept that vow for the rest of his life. What truly moved his family was the level of planning behind everything. Tom didn't just leave behind wealth, he left behind wisdom. He made sure certain assets were protected from taxes, ensured that no one would be burdened with complicated legal battles, and even set aside funds specifically for family traditions he hoped they would continue, like gatherings at the ranch during holidays. As they read deeper into his plans, they discovered charitable trusts dedicated to causes that mattered to him, but that he never discussed openly. Education programs for young artists, quiet funding for families of veterans, support for conservation groups. Tom had spread his generosity across countless people and organizations without ever seeking recognition. His family realized that the true extent of his kindness was far greater than anyone ever knew. Another unexpected detail came from his long relationship with the ranch. It wasn't just property to him, it was the place where he found purpose outside of fame. Inside his notes were detailed instructions on how to preserve the land, protect the wildlife, and maintain the peaceful atmosphere he cherished. He wanted the ranch to stay in the family for generations, not as a financial asset, but as a sanctuary where his loved ones could reconnect with each other and with the values he believed in. It was in these moments that his family began to grasp the emotional impact behind his choices. Tom had never been a man who raised his voice or demanded attention. He had always carried himself with quiet strength, and now his legacy reflected that same steady presence. He didn't leave behind a fortune to impress anyone. He built it to protect, to guide, and to express love in the most genuine way he knew. Going through his private notes was like hearing his voice again, calm, thoughtful, steady. His words reminded them of the values he lived by: responsibility, respect, and deep devotion to the people he cared about. They began to understand that his true gift wasn't the money or the land, it was the example he set every single day. But the biggest discovery was still waiting at the bottom of the final storage box, something so emotional and deeply personal that it left every member of his family silent. When they saw it, at the very bottom of the last box, his family found a collection of personal journals and letters, documents that revealed the heart behind every decision Tom Selleck had ever made. These were not public statements or scripted reflections. These were private, handwritten notes where he poured out his thoughts, hopes, and fears. Reading them, his family could feel the depth of his care, the weight of responsibility he carried, and the unwavering dedication he had for their well-being. The journals revealed the small, intimate details that had guided him for decades. He wrote about how he wanted each family member to understand not only financial security, but also emotional strength. He encouraged them to pursue their passions, to remain humble, and to support each other through life's inevitable struggles. In one entry, he explained that the fortune he built was not meant to create dependence, but to provide freedom, the freedom to make choices without fear or restriction. Every investment, every property, every trust was connected to this principle. His family was struck by how deeply personal these writings were. Tom's voice came through clearly, a man who had always been reserved, thoughtful, and kind, now speaking directly to the people he loved most. He shared reflections about the challenges of fame, the responsibilities he felt as a father and husband, and the lessons he had learned from a lifetime of careful decision-making. It was as if he had written a final guide, ensuring that even after he was gone, his family could feel his presence and guidance. One of the most emotional discoveries was a series of letters addressed to specific family members, each offering personal advice or encouragement tailored to their lives. Some were practical, about managing the inheritance wisely. Others were deeply emotional, reminding them to care for one another, cherish the simple moments, and never lose sight of who they were. Reading them brought tears, not from sadness, but from awe at the thoughtfulness and love behind every word. Beyond the financial and practical guidance, Tom's journals revealed a man who valued integrity above all else. He had made promises to himself, to his family, and to those he quietly supported that he had kept meticulously for decades. His careful planning ensured that his family would not only be protected, but also inspired by the example he left behind. It was a legacy far richer than any sum of money could ever convey. By the time they finished reading, his family understood the full impact of what Tom Selleck had done. They were overwhelmed not just by the fortune he left, but by the care, foresight, and love woven into every decision. It wasn't wealth alone, it was a lifelong expression of devotion, responsibility, and thoughtfulness that had been quietly building for decades. In the end, Tom's true legacy is not the properties, trusts, or bank accounts. It is the emotional and moral compass he instilled in his family. It is the quiet example of a life lived with integrity, patience, and love. His fortune made them cry, not because of the numbers, but because it revealed the depth of a man who never sought attention, never demanded praise, and never failed to protect the people he cared about most, even in death. Tom Selleck's presence is felt in every corner of the life he built: the ranch, the family, the values, and the private acts of generosity that quietly shaped the lives of those he loved. His story reminds us that true wealth is not measured by what you accumulate, but by the love, care, and thoughtfulness you leave behind.